Good, good evening, everyone. It's as always, it's Gordon Causey coming to you live and unscripted with Candy the Wonder Dog, who is jumping all over me for her treat. I see that I already have Danny and Eat Me here, uh, both from Montreal. So two Canadians. I'll be interested to see if we have any of our American friends join in, interested in perhaps hearing what a Canadian has to say about President Donald Trump's address to the joint session of Congress. But before I get going now, I see the live stream is filling up a little more, so please fill the live chat. I enjoy reading what's being written. Let me get the treat out of my pocket. Shake, lay down, speak, 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 speak. There we go. There's a little better. I like to make her a decent bark. Oh man, oh man. I don't know how long that speech went on. It was probably an hour and a half plus. Um, and it ended about 10, 15 minutes ago. And Brett Skinner, who is an American, he is here saying, and Brett Skinner enjoyed the end of the speech. Well, it did go on and on. There was a lot of repetition, certainly. Poj Malik, another American, is here. So everyone's saying hi to each other. Um, Eat Me is of the opinion that it was a hell of a speech tonight, boring at times, but still very good. The one thing I think that whether you're an American or a Canadian, what people appreciate about Donald Trump is the degree to which he goes off script. I don't think there's any question he was reading off a teleprompter. You'd see, and the way I understand that teleprompters work, they're kind of a clear glass type screen, and the individual giving the speech has a foot pedal that they operate, that gate, that it's like the accelerator on your car, and it moves the text of the speech. But Trump will quite often, unlike most politicians, will quite often deviate from the script and then go back to it and deviate and go back to it. And it certainly makes things interesting. And he'll also react to he can Trump knows how to read a room far better than any politician I've ever seen before. He knows how to gauge the reaction. And I wrote down, I say I'm live and unscripted, and I am. 99.9% of the videos that I put out are simply me, what's on the top of my head. But tonight I took down copious notes. Well, not copious. I took down a number of notes. And one of the first things that I noted in the reaction was the division in the Congress itself. This was a joint session of Congress. What that means is that there is the House of Representatives, 400 plus members, as well as sitting U.S. senators. And Trump was there with behind him to his right. To Trump's right was J.D. Vance, who is the vice president and president of the Senate. And then on his left shoulder and behind was a gentleman whose name escapes me, but he is the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And what a reaction! The Republican side, which is on the right hand side of the as Trump looked out, they were on his left. As they're looking at Trump, they're on the right hand side. So as you're walking down, everyone, you guys have probably all seen it, or at least a good chunk of it. So you know the dynamics of how the session is organized. But it struck me. I pulled out a U.S. $1 bill, and on the U.S. $1 bill is what they refer to as the seal of the United States. That's the eagle holding a banner in its beak, and written on the banner is a slogan in Latin, and many will know this, and I know I'm repeating commonly held knowledge for the vast majority of people, But I also know there's always one or two people who don't know. And on that seal of the United States, the eagle, the banner, it says "E pluribus unum," and that is a Latin phrase, and it means "out of many, one." And it speaks to what has made the United States such a successful country over the course of its nearly 250-year history is the fact that they have taken in divergent populations from all over the world, from all over Europe, from all over Great Britain, and from every other corner of the planet. And the idea, when you take an oath of citizenship in the United States, it's my understanding that the judge swearing individuals in and installing them as American citizens, that the judge will say something to the effect of, from this day forward, you cease to be Italian, you cease to be African or Australian or Asian or whatever. You are now an American. It's this concept of a melting pot. Canadians have a different perspective, especially since Pierre Elliott Trudeau was Prime Minister of Canada, and going forward, certainly with his son, Justin Trudeau, is this idea that there is no core Canadian identity. We embraced, especially under Pierre Elliott Trudeau, this concept of multiculturalism, no melting pot, no blending, no, you know, creating an alloy like steel. Instead, we're all just a community of communities. And in the United States, there's this idea of unity, that you are an American first. Yet, when you watch the reaction to Trump's speech throughout so much of it, the to Trump's left, the right hand side of the, I'll call it an auditorium, the right hand side was standing up and applauding, and the left-hand side was sitting on their hands, just going through. There, right off the bat, at the beginning, there were catcalls and shouts, and there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Green. I don't know who he is. I don't know. He's probably, I would imagine, a member of the House of Representatives. He might be a member of the Senate. My guess is that he is in Congress. And this is a point that sometimes gets confused, because usually senators are called senators and members of the House of Representatives are called congressmen or congresswomen or congresspersons. But the fact of the matter is that whether you're a senator or a member of the House, both are members of the Congress. Small minor point, but it's just something I find curious. But at any rate, this gentleman had to be removed. I think J.D. Vance called the sergeant at arms or whatever, and he was removed very peacefully. He appeared to be an older, probably somewhere in around 60, I'm guessing. I could be wrong. I think black gentleman. He had his hair in a ponytail. He was carrying a cane with a gold or brass type hand to it, and he was peacefully removed from the chamber. And then Trump went on with his speech, and the Democratic members of Congress had these black signs with white lettering, and they said things like Musk steals, save Medicaid, and other anti negative things. False was another one. False. They'd hold these things up and false. I'm going to try and keep up with the live chat to see. And I welcome everyone. You're welcome to fill up the live chat. I'll populate it onto the screen so that anyone and everyone can see it. Before I get into the meat of this, just to give some perspective, yes, I am a Canadian, 58, going to be 59 in July, 58-year-old Canadian who ticks off all the boxes for cancel culture, which is something Trump in the United States is repudiating. But in Canada, it's still very much the flavor of the month to cancel voices and to squelch free speech, and to say to anyone who fits my demographic, you shut up and sit down, and you don't get to talk. I am a 58-year-old Christian, straight, white male. Cancel, 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 cancel. And that Trump certainly covered off that during his speech. The ending of DEI, the ending of woke ideology, the end of applying critical race theory, and so many other divisive, and I will say this boldly, these divisive policies that have been normalized, certainly during the Obama and the Biden administrations. We've seen this move to the left and this stark move, I would call it a move to the radical left, where human beings are put into groups, put into camps, put into tribes. You have to, your voice, your opinions, the things you say, they are less important than to which group you belong. And that is, in my eyes, and I'll say it boldly, that is garbage and it is wrong. So I'm going to read I have Koji Malik saying that the United States is a salad. Forget a melting pot, it is a salad. Okay. John's referring to the ponytail gentleman with a cane. Yeah, that was the guy who was and Brett is saying to refer to him as a disgraceful POS. We all know what POS stands for. I don't have to say it. Danny wants to go off topic, but your thoughts on certain schools in Canada playing only the Punjab national anthem daily. What the hell is going on in this country? We are way too tolerant. I think a lot of Canadians, certainly those of us on the right-hand side of the aisle, for lack of a better, that's a very American expression, but those of us of a conservative mindset found a lot to like in President Donald Trump's speech. And you look, and I don't know anything about this fact that we have a school in Canada that's playing the Punjabi national anthem, which would be for, that's a whole other can of worms, the Khalistan, this idea. There are Sikh individuals in the Indian province of Punjab who want to create a new nation, the nation of Khalistan, I think it's called, for members of the Sikh faith. And that's too far off topic for tonight. John 5 is saying, are the US now our enemy, or is this what the media wants us to think with respect to tariffs? Well, I think a lot, I was listening to the primary motivation to me listening to the speech was I wanted to hear what Trump was going to say on tariffs. And quite honestly, I came away somewhat disappointed. He did not talk at length about them, except in very broad, generalistic terms. Tariffs are wonderful. Tariffs are great. Tariffs will allow us to balance the budget. Tariffs will stop us from being ripped off by other countries. Tariffs will resolve massive trade imbalances between countries like Canada and Mexico and China and other countries. That tariffs are going to level the playing field. Tariffs are wonderful. And that is not my opinion. That is the one area in which I'm going to disagree with President Donald Trump. So much more, pretty much everything else he had to say, I was in support of. And I would like to further add that I think there's a tendency often for individuals to listen to a speech like that and then immediately go to their favorite source for news. If you're a Canadian, that might be CBC, CTV Global. If you're an American, NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, Fox. You'll go to your preferred news outlet and then listen to talking heads that you like and say, okay, now, tell me what I should think. And this is something of a theme on my station. I refer to the media as a programming agent that tells people what to think, what to believe, and even how to feel about things. And I think that is very destructive. And I want you to know that I am coming live 10, I guess it would be now 15, 20 minutes ago, probably 20, 25 minutes ago, that the speech ended. And I'm coming unfiltered. I didn't go to any of those aforementioned media outlets to kind of get a frame of reference and to help explain things to me. I am giving my unvarnished reaction without having it gone through the filter of some media outlet. None of the aforementioned, nothing. I haven't even listened to any other YouTubers talking about it. So this is my unvarnished reaction as a Canadian, and the regulars here, John, Eat Me, Brett, Danny, uh, everyone who's been on my channel regularly and contributes. You guys are amazing. I love the way you contribute. Koja Malik is more recent, and she's an active participant. Um, you guys will know that, but in case anyone is new, I'm a Canadian born 1966, but when I was 6 months old, we moved down to the United States of America. And I was down there in New York and then later in New Jersey until 1975. I was there pretty much, for the duration of the Vietnam War. And certainly during the period at which the United States had gone full both feet. They dove fully into the Vietnam War, and we left as the Vietnam War ended. But came back to Canada in 1975. I lived a year and a half in Burlington, Ontario, Canada, which is just west of Toronto, a little suburb of Toronto. My dad worked in Toronto. And then we spent a year. I went to grade 6 in Portland, Oregon. So I'm not your average typical Canadian. I have spent time growing up in the US, and I've gone back for many visits. The last time I spent a protracted amount of time in the US, I spent about a week down in my old hometown of Glen Rock, New Jersey. I just wanted to see it. I have an 11-year-old, 11 now. In 2019, he was 6, and he kept asking me, Dad, what was it like when you were my age? What did you do when you were my age when this happened? Yeah. And so I started referencing back to all my experiences when I was 5, 6, 7 years of age, and they were all happening down in Glen Rock, New Jersey, and it got it on my mind, and I figured, let's go take a trip. And we went back to Glen Rock, New Jersey, and that was the last decently long visit that I had in the US, but I've had many. I'm gonna just catch up on the chat before I get into my notes. Eat Me is writing at Koj Malik. Come and live here in Canada. Work all day to barely pay your rent, utilities, and if you have enough, maybe get some food and finish at the food bank if you have an issue of eating or heating. Things are bad in Canada, and they are going to get worse because of this looming trade war. And again, this is the one area where I disconnect from President Donald Trump. Should not be surprising. I'm a Canadian. The tariffs are certainly going to hurt us. I think they're also going to hurt Americans, but it's going to hurt Canadians exponentially worse. We are a far smaller economy. The American economy is more than 10 times bigger than the Canadian economy. And we are the junior partner in a free trade relationship. So it's catching up, seeing if there's anything that's being written. Getting on. Yeah, well, I'm not rich, so hence why my station has almost no production values, and I'm using a free streaming software to improve the functionality. But StreamYard, if it wasn't free, I wouldn't be using it. Koj Malik is saying something is not true. No one cares what white people sow, but white people care what everyone does. Okay, I think, don't worry about typos. We all make them. No one cares what white people do, I think you meant to, Matt, but white people care about what everyone else does. I don't like to get into race games. We're human. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I hate this division that happens because there's a spectrum of opinion, a spectrum of belief. What do Black Americans think? It depends which Black American you're talking to. I found it very racist when Joe Biden said to a young, I think he was a Black gentleman, and he said that if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. And it's like, what? Blacks are supposed, All black men think the same, do they, Joe? Huh, that's interesting. There's a divergence. There are a lot of black individuals who support Donald Trump, and there's a lot of black Americans who detest Donald Trump. Some adore him, some are in between. Same as white Americans. I mean, I wish we could move past race, but unfortunately, you know, racism has caused a lot of deep, lasting scars, and they're not going to go away easy. Um, People, it's hard to let things like that go. John is rather, me is writing to John. Trump should maybe wait until our election. He it's obvious that he dislikes the liberals and probably hates Trudeau. Uh, POS, point of sale. Yeah, sure. Um, what is Koj Malik is writing to Eat Me? My mom once had 40 cents in a bottle and the end of her payday to buy a soda. That has been happening a long time for minorities, but not all. And then further, she says to Eat Me, I guess it's time to buy some land and grow your own food. Talk about prepping. Sharunian is here and saying that passport bros should be illegal. And Sharunian goes on to say, uh-huh. I'm not a big fan of profanity, but I also believe in free speech. Koja Malik is writing that she ate rabbits growing up, cleaned the field, sold rabbits, fish in the city. You don't what is needed. Probably didn't write that the way you intended. And again, I don't worry about typos and syntax because this isn't the best form of communication. Typing isn't. Anyway, what's going? Yeah, exactly. Clean, not cleaned. Gleaned. You meant to say gleaned. Okay. Isn't spell check wonderful? It's such a pain. John 5 is writing, if it was not Trump, would China or Russia tariff or destroy US or us, Canada, instead? Who knows? We're fortunate. Canada, throughout our history, has been very fortunate to live directly north and to be so closely aligned with the world's preeminent military power. And you look at the size of their military, and it's unbelievable compared to Canada's military, even on a proportionate basis. Canada, we don't even have 100,000 uniformed troops, and that's Reg Force and reservists combined, whereas the United States has that many already stationed overseas right now, to say nothing of their uniformed personnel who are residing within the United States proper. They have more troops overseas stationed all around the world than Canada has in total. And why has Canada been why do we spend so little on defense? Why spend the money? We got the US as our closest ally living directly to our south. We can spend money on other things. We can spend money on healthcare. We can spend money on graft and corruption and fraud, which there is plenty of that in the United States as well. Sharunian's writing, doxing laws have changed in the country thanks to these leaders. Brett Skinner is writing that he cried a little when the kid got deputized by the Secret Service. There was a young kid, I think 12 years of age, who had been diagnosed with brain cancer, and Donald Trump pointed him out. His dad was there holding him up, and he was wearing a uniform, and this kid had been given 5 months to live or something like that. This was during Trump's speech, and kid's name was DJ. And so he held him up, and then this kid, his dream, 12-year-old kid, wants to be in law enforcement, and apparently has been deputized several times and made an honorary police officer, and he was wearing a law enforcement style uniform. And then Trump had some individual with the Secret Service. He pointed out that he was being made an honorary member of the Secret Service, and he was handed credentials And the dad held him up, and the touching moment, the tear-jerker moment, was when the kid leaned over and hugged the man who had given him the credentials. And the crowd started to yell, DJ, DJ. At first, I thought they were saying USA, USA, which happened a few times during the speech, happened at the beginning, happened a couple more times. But when they were yelling DJ, at first I thought they were yelling USA, USA. So let me catch up on the messages. Eat Me's writing at Koji Malik, the movie Remember the Titans. It was about integration of black and white in schools. Many will have seen the movie. It starred Denzel Washington as the coach of a high school that was forced to integrate. Biden said, in no way I'm going to let my little girl go to a jungle school. That was true. And that was like in 1977, 1978. You know, and unfortunately, this is the case. There are a lot of individuals who don't like Donald Trump, and that's fair enough. You know, I think that's fair commentary. It's a free country. You don't have to like someone. But the difficulty is, you talk about a scarcity of decent choices. You know, okay, you don't like Donald Trump. You're telling me you like Joe Biden. If you don't vote, if you're not voting for me, you ain't black. I'm not letting my daughters go to a school that's going to be a jungle. An integrated school is going to be a jungle. What kind of message does that send? And you have to remember that it is the Democratic Party that was the racist party. The Democrats used to own the southern US during the Jim Crow era of segregation. That was the Democrats. The Republicans were the party of Abraham Lincoln. He was their first, that was a new party. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president of the United States in 1860, the Republican they were the new party, and the Democrats were from the South, were from the slaveholding South. I'm sure it would not surprise me, I'm not 100% sure, but John Wilkes Booth and the rest, in all likelihood, Democrats. Just going to try and catch up on the message, on what's being written. Danny's writing that he as well grew up eating rabbit, squirrels, partridge, grouse that he hunted himself. A lot of Canadians did. Amy says partridge are good, but lacks meat on their bones. Don't worry about the typos. I can 99% of the time figure them out. Sharunian can't travel anymore. Eat Me's smiling at something. And Koji Malik is saying that she would never want to be that dependent on another country. We didn't used to have the same degree of dependency as we do now. I did a video on it already, talking about 1988, when Canada, we had an election over free trade, and the Conservative Party, and this is the way the world is flipped upside down, the Conservative Party put forward free trade, and Canadians endorsed it in a federal election. And we ceded our economic sovereignty. And now 37 odd years later, it looks like our political sovereignty is very much at risk. And I've already outlined in my last couple videos about how things could shake down if Doug Ford follows through on his promise to embargo Canadian nickel and won't send it into the US, which is used in nickel plating. Nickel plating is used in all kinds of industries, a lot in the automobile industry, certainly in the arms industry. It's used in currencies. It has many uses, nickel. And if we embargo, and apparently the United States gets 50% of the nickel that it uses in manufacturing across all industries, 50% of the nickel they use comes from Ontario. And if they're not getting it, then you're going to see factories closing. And could that be seen? Could Trump and could the American side take that as a declaration of war? Part of the rationale, I'm convinced, this is my opinion, part of the rationale for Donald Trump imposing tariffs on aluminum and steel is a desire to revive, to resurrect, to build up the American steel and aluminum industries. That's not to say they are extinct. They do exist. It wouldn't be a resurrection. They're not dead. but they are a fraction of what they have been in the past. And the reason the US steel industry, for example, is a fraction of what it used to be in the past is because they can get cheaper steel from Canada, where we're producing steel with a dollar that's worth less than 70 cents US. They're getting it from China, and American steel just isn't being made. And is that steel is a major component of the arms industry. And if a war ever comes along and you need an arms industry and you need manufacturing of the weapons of war, well, if you're at war, if the US ends up at war with China, is China going to continue to supply the United States with the steel it needs? Think about it. And so, uh, I don't see anything wrong, inherently wrong, with the United States looking to build up its steel and aluminum industries. You know, forewarned is forewarned is forearmed. They're trying to get ahead of the curve. So I'm just catching up. Eat Me was touched by the DJ, the young lad. If you didn't choke up a little at that, depends. I'm a bit of a sentimental old. I'm becoming a sob factory. The ability to choke me up is getting easier and easier with each passing year. Danny is asking whether or not I think that Trump will drop the tariffs if Poilievre gets in. No, I don't think so. I don't think it's about Poilievre or Carney or Trudeau. I think, why is he bringing it in on Mexico? He's doing this across the board. We tend to think he's targeting Canada. He's targeting, just about everyone. He wants to build up the US economy, and he is convinced, rightly or wrongly, and I think he's wrong, that the best way to build up the United States is to put a fortress around it to a degree, to be isolationist, not just in terms of, military intervention and things of that nature, but being isolationist in terms of, building a wall around the United States and forcing countries. The US has the world's largest economy still. China's on the rise, but the US is still number one in the world. And countries want to sell their goods, their products, their minerals. Everyone wants access to the American market. And Trump is going to try and use that to his advantage. You want to sell cars in our market? Well, your cars have to be built in the United States. He talked about the fact during his speech that Honda is now apparently opening up a plant to build cars in, I think it's Indiana. And he also talked about having a tax incentives for individuals taking out car loans, where the interest payments on a car loan will be tax deductible, provided the car you bought, the loan you took out on a car, that car has to be produced in the United States of America. Koji Malik stopped watching movies years and years ago, myself as well. I don't watch many movies anymore. I've seen enough movies over the course of my lifetime. When my older kids were younger, that's kind of when I tapped out. I watched things like Monsters Inc. and Finding Nemo, and movies in around the early 2000s with my two older kids. And now I've largely tapped out. With the young guy, we've seen Angry Birds. I went through the kid phase with him too. He's 11 now, so I saw Angry Birds and a few other kid-style movies. But got to remember too, COVID. From 2020, 2021, 2022, no one was going to the movies because, oh my God, you're all going to die of the deadly coronavirus, and we can't open our theater up. Anyway, continuing on. Sharunian's writing, was born and raised in Brampton, and then he stayed in the UK. And then we have Danny writing, don't forget, folks, the Southern Democrats created the KKK. Enough said. Yes. Things flip around. Things flip around. Black becomes white, white becomes black, and then it switches back. You know, it's weird. It's strange. It's Orwellian. It's almost like the Ministry of Truth, where Winston, the main character in that book, worked. And the old reality would be sent down the memory hole, and it would be treated as though it never existed, and that things. There are people now who think currently that, oh, the South is Republican. It's all the red states, and they've always been red. No, they didn't. That's just media programming that has led people to believe that states like Alabama and Tennessee and Mississippi, that these were always red states. No, they used to be blue Democrat states. Now they're red. What's Koji Malik writing? And Koji Malik makes a distinction, and this is common, that you have Democrats and then you have Dixiecrats, and Dixiecrats are the racist wing of the Democratic Party, as if the Democratic Party has two faces. And certainly, given his age, he transitioned through that period where, when Biden was a young man, they were all the Dixiecrats, and then as we moved into the John F. Kennedy era, that's when, and Lyndon Johnson afterwards, and the signing of civil rights legislation during the Martin Luther King era made the old Dixiecrats became more liberal in their ideology, whereas previously they had been far more racist and conservative. And well, thank you, Sharunian. Beautiful family, great people. You got to get to know me beyond Facebook or YouTube. I mean, that's the thing about social media and media in general of any stripe. What you see on here is what an individual puts out. On Facebook, you see this all the time. People give you a snapshot into their best life, their best self. You don't get the unvarnished truth with anything, and that's true with Trump. Trump's public persona, the persona he puts out, his media profile, generally speaking, I do not like it. I find him braggacious, arrogant, dismissive, and so I don't like his public persona. I wonder whether or not I would like him without a camera on, if I met him personally, face to face, away from, it'll never happen. So it's debatable. Likewise, I'll give an example, another American president, Barack Obama, certainly when he came onto the scene, I loved his public persona. He was, articulate, not just articulate, that's a crappy word. I mean, he was charismatic, that's a better word, charismatic, and an orator, not just articulate, but man, he could command a room. I watched Barack Obama give the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention that was nominating John Kerry, and that would have been, I think, in 2004. I think it was 2004 or 2000. I think it would have been 2004. And he gave the keynote address, and we are, we are one nation. The pundits, they love to divide us. Blue state for Democrat, red state for, I'm here to tell you, we are one people. We are the United States of America. It was a wonderful speech. I'd invite you to watch it. I enjoyed it very much. Now, if I met Barack Obama, the real man, not the public persona, maybe I'd hate him. You don't know. Anyway, that's enough on that. Koji Malik was working outside, weeding, cleaning, and getting ready to plant something today. Rub that into us Canadians, where I'm still blanketed in snow. Thanks a lot. Koji Malik is down in Florida. I'm almost caught up. Eat Me was expecting to hear Trump say that the United States was leaving NATO. and that it seems that Zelensky has seen the light after it was announced that no more U.S. aid, no soup for you, the soup Nazi. We'll see how that unfolds. I mean, Zelensky is a politician, and he seems to be trying to play both sides. You know, I want to get to my notes because a lot of what I saw, because Trump touched on so many things, and he certainly touched on the situation in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia. Uh, and Koji Malik thinks no one's going to be able to afford a car. The price of cars is insane, and with these tariffs, it's conceivable that the price of vehicles is going to go up. Uh, let's see what Koji Malik writes. A lot of people did die in that war. I think you're talking about Ukraine, Russia. Yeah, it's probably a million, probably hundreds of thousands anyway. Um, uh, kids' movies. Koji Malik is writing that Florida hasn't been blue for almost more than 2 decades. I view Florida as being red with the potential to go blue. Like I consider it red light. But that's just my opinion. You would know better than I. You live there, and it always depends on what part of the state you live in. And there's a big divide in the United States of America. Same here in Canada. The major urban centers tend to be lean far more left, and the rural areas tend to lean far more right. Let's see what's being written. Eat me to Danny. Okay, I'm gonna. That's kind of a side conversation about different. And just catching up. Uh, oh, that's horrible. But I will say this about your first lady. She is a very attractive woman, Melania Trump. Although, this fixation on first ladies in the United States, I don't think is genuinely healthy. I think it's a desire that Americans have for royalty. The Americans kicked out the monarchy after the revolution. No more monarch, but they still seem to want royalty and they want a queen. And so they've taken the first lady and elevated her almost to the status of a queen. And I don't think it's particularly healthy. Americans didn't vote for Melania Trump. I think no one knows who Farage or what's the name of the British prime minister. I keep forgetting. no one cares who his spouse is. No, Trudeau kind of tried to play up his wife, but usually Canadians, we tend to imitate the Americans a bit in elevating our, prime minister's wife. We've never elected a woman to be prime minister of Canada. We had one, Kim Campbell, but she was not elected. And Sharunian has British and Canadian citizenship. And Danny keeps helping me out. Starmer. Why can't I keep that name in my head? Keir Starmer. And Amy looked it up as well or knew it. But at any rate, let me get to my notes. So the speech started out with Trump saying, America is back and leading to chants of USA, USA, USA. And I immediately noticed the breakdown in the room between the Democratic side sitting on their hands with their stupid signs saying false and save Medicaid and no to Elon Musk or whatever they said on them. And so you got one side of half the room standing and half the room sitting down, and that became even more stark as the speech wore on. And he talked about the migrant crisis. He talked about how the wonderful things he's done to seal off the southern border. Just basically patting himself on the back. And at one point, it was interesting. He said, that that side, this side over here which was on his right. He made mention of that. This side to my right, not that they're on the right, but this side to my right. Doesn't matter what I do. Doesn't matter what I do. I could cure cancer. I could cure a horrible disease, and they wouldn't stand up. And Trump was bang on the money here. When the Democrats are so affected with Trump derangement syndrome that even when he does good things, they refuse to even acknowledge it. And I brought up many times the fact that it was his administration, and it's in the dying days of the Trump administration, they brokered what were referred to as the Abraham Accords between Israel and Morocco and the United Arab Emirates and elements within the Islamic world. The Trump administration brokered a peace deal that are called the Abraham Accords. And if that had been done by Clinton or Obama or Biden, they would have gotten a Nobel Peace Prize. But the Democrats could not, and their media mouthpieces would not give Trump a win on anything. And he was bang on the money when he said that no matter what I do, even if I cured cancer, or he didn't say cancer, he said a disease, or if he brought peace to the world, they'd still sit on their hands and refuse to acknowledge any accomplishment. And at one point, they showed a picture of Nancy Pelosi, and I swear to God, it looked like the woman was crying. It looked like she was visibly upset. And I'm just looking over my notes. Uh, he talked about the fact that he's freezing hiring in the federal bureaucracy. He's going to be firing people who don't come into work. You have so many people who now work remotely. There are suggestions, allegations that there are federal government workers who are getting paid by the federal government while they actually go and do other jobs. So they're double dipping in a way. They've got their federal government job that they're not checked on, working remotely. So they go and goodness knows what. Maybe they're consulting, maybe they're working, managing another business somewhere. So they're getting two paychecks. He talked about the green new scam and canceling it. And so you're no longer going to be forced to buy an electric automobile. You can buy one if you want, but it's not going to. And getting out of the World Health Organizations and getting out of the UN Human Rights Commission or whatever it is, and that if you want to bring in a new regulation on business, you first must eliminate 10. And here's something that's interesting that I read with relation to nickel, because I think this is very key. If Ford, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, does follow through and embargoes Ontario nickel from going into the United States. The U.S. right now has one active nickel mine. It's in Michigan. It's called Eagle Mining, and they have one active nickel mine in the entire United States. It's said that there are nickel deposits in the state of Minnesota as well. There may be others. Who knows? There's a lot of work that goes into developing a mine. And the problem is, it can take 15, 20 years to jump through all the regulatory hoops that are needed to go through to get approval. And often you'll go 10, 15, 20 years trying to get a mine approved. And ultimately, the bureaucrats in Washington will deny it. So you've invested, I don't know how many millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars into doing feasibility studies and assay work and everything else to get a mine going, and then ultimately denied, you can't open your mine. Go and buy your nickel from Ontario. Well, maybe now the U.S. will be able to develop nickel deposits in their own country. I love the fact that Donald Trump is an advocate for free speech. I think there's a danger, though, of should anyone be allowed to speak in favor of transgender ideology. And even though I disagree with transgender ideology, I wouldn't want to see individuals who support it to be silenced and censored. They should still be allowed to express their ideas, their thoughts, their views, their opinions, especially when I don't agree with them. So that's, it's a two-edged sword. It's one thing, everyone's a free speech advocate and you're censoring me when they feel their voice is being silenced. But then the question you have to ask is how willing are they to silence the voices of others? And quite often, free speech, it's all a question of, well, what speech are we talking about? Uh, he talked about one thing that when it comes to the whole transgender business, and this was a story I hadn't heard before about this young girl, Peyton. I forget the last name, but she was on a volleyball court playing against a team that had a male player, and that male player spiked the ball so hard that it caused, as I understand it, brain damage and caused temporary paralysis. And boys should not be competing against girls. And the Democratic side of the aisle, it just blows my mind that they can't acknowledge that. And then the last note I had was on this guy, Mark Fogel, or Fogel, not exactly sure how you pronounce his last name, Mark Fogel. He's a teacher who was arrested and sentenced to 14 years in a Soviet or a Russian labor camp as a spy. And he was restored to his 95-year-old mother who had petitioned Trump to get him out. And they did a prisoner exchange. The Americans gave up a Russian prisoner accused of spying, and they got back their citizen accused of spying. And do you think, then here's one area where I'm like, why are the Democrats still sitting on their hands? Here is an American man who was restored to his family. Can't you at least stand up for that? But they can't, because that would be acknowledging that Donald Trump did something good. And they want everyone thinking that Donald Trump is evil incarnate, incapable of anything good, polarization on steroids, and it drives me crazy. So that's as much. I thought the speech, by and large, was excellent. It was very partisan in nature. He was very much throwing red meat to his MAGA base, but there were elements there where the left side of the aisle could have at least acknowledged some things. The only time I heard the Democrats applaud was when Trump talked about the $350 billion that the United States has sent to Zelensky and Ukraine. And the Democrats started to applaud. Yay, we $350 billion funding war. And Trump then said, and you probably want to keep it going for another 5 years. And there were still applause going on. They want that war to go on and on and on and on. They want more Ukrainians dead, more Russians dead. They don't want peace. It's long been said that the Democrats are the war party. Lyndon Johnson put the United States both feet into Vietnam. And, they're neck deep in the big muddy, to quote a Pete Seeger song, neck deep in the big muddy, and the big fool says to keep on going. And that's the Democratic Party. They have long been considered the party of war, and they were applauding the idea of having the U.S. continue to spend hundreds of billions of dollars funding Ukraine in a devastating and incredibly catastrophic war. And Democrats, yeah, more death. Let's waste more hundreds of billions of dollars. Yay. Unbelievable. And, these are the things I like about Donald Trump. The thing I don't like is I wish his tariffs were more targeted toward countries that have an adversarial relationship with the United States, principally among them China. Don't go after your allies. And I understand if you want to build up your aluminum steel industry, your mining sector, and produce your own nickel, great. But rather than doing a 25% tariff, bang, all at once on midnight just yesterday, why not start off slow? Why not make it, I don't know, 5% every 6 months. And then, you know, so it's 10 after a year, 20 after 2, 2.5 years. And that would give supply chains a chance to adjust to the new reality, and it wouldn't be a shock. That's just not that Donald Trump is ever going to listen to me. I'm going to start somewhere arbitrary. Sorry if I missed any of the comments, but I wanted to go on there for a bit. Got Eaton saying she was expecting Trump to say that the USA was I read that already. And I read that already. Okay, so I scrolled back too far. Let's see. Oh yeah, I read that one. I'm just going to try and catch back up. Okay, here's where we picked up. Koja Malik thinks that Melania looks like a KGB operative, the Ice Queen. Fair enough. Call her Natasha from Evil's old. She is KGB agent whose code name is Melania, but is actually Natasha from the old Rocky Bullwinkle show. All right, let's see. Yeah. Then Brett, please. I respectfully on my channel, I appreciate hearing opposing points of view. Genuinely, I don't want to live in an echo chamber, and I am thankful that someone like Koja Malik, even though she knows I disagree with her on a lot of things, and yet she still is willing to continue to engage in dialogue. And when you're just typing things out, just texting things out, you lose tone, and so things can seem a lot more harsh and in your face than they're actually intended to be. So anyway, and Matt, oh yeah, the egg part was brought up. I've got 1,000,001 things that I could say about so many different things. And one of the things is I think Trump quite possibly is getting some very bad advice on the tariff front, especially when he's imposing tariffs on close partner allied countries. And I think it's a globalist move to crater not just the American economy, but the world economy, and to force us into a situation where, and I talked about this in my last 2 videos about the fact that, we're going to be looking at so many crises, plural, and one of those one crisis will be an economic crisis. And what the U.S. can do to mitigate it, the U.S. has far more. It's the world's largest reserve currency. They have a lot more economic power to prop things up than we do here in Canada. And so Washington can step up with COVID style, safety net measures than Canada can. We are in trouble. Brett's writing, Max import penguins. Penguin eggs. Max Power is writing, it wouldn't surprise me if some ridiculous billionaire insists on eating penguin eggs. Ridiculous billionaire, would that be Elon? Danny, duck eggs are big and delicious. 2 duck egg omelet will feed 4 people. I don't think I've ever had any egg other than a chicken egg. Oh yes, the $5 million gold card is actually wild. And we've had something, in Canada they've had a system by which an entrepreneurial class of citizen who can kind of jump the line, so to speak. Anyone coming into Canada who's investing in business and is going to create jobs has been able to jump the line, go to the front of the line, and provided they can show X number of dollars of net worth, they're able to speed their entry into Canada, whereas everyone else, you got to go to the immigration office, fill out the paperwork. Do you speak English? Do you speak French? And what skills do you have? And this is before Trudeau came along and just said, hey, it's a free-for-all. I mean, what the United States has experienced on its southern border with all these people storming in Uh, it's been happening here in Canada too. Trudeau only just recently pulled it back, recognizing that it was a major issue for Canadian voters and that it was going to slaughter the Liberals in the forthcoming federal election. So within the last 3-4 months, he pulled back on the open door immigration policy that's been in place for the better part of his time as prime minister. He's just been opening it up wider and wider and wider. Uh, so what Trump is doing is, I think they actually spend $5 million to jump the line, to get into the United States of America. If you give us $5 million, there's a fast track to citizenship. Uh, let's see what Max Power is writing. Next year, platinum card, 100 billion, and you get to have penguin eggs. Oh, very good. It's good to see everyone having a sense of humor. Whale oils, right? In Canada, goose eggs are certain to be under tariffs of some sort. So like I said, I've never tried, but I hate Canada geese. I hate those things. Winged snakes, when you're on the golf course, they hiss at you, and they put out their wings and they get quite, and I do not, never been attacked by one, and I don't want to be. Uh, Amy's talking about Trump derangement syndrome, the second mind virus pandemic. Either we like the guy or not. He won a significant victory, especially when you had all the mainstream media hammering at him the fact that he was able to win in that environment. I mean, remember in the 2020 election, we actually had the FBI suggesting that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. You talk about influencing, putting out false information. And that false information, I'm sure, changed a significant number of votes. If people had known the truth that Hunter Biden, that story, that laptop was a legitimate story, if they'd known it was legitimate, a lot of people who voted for Biden would have either not voted at all or voted for Trump. So that impacted the election. Misinformation put out, sanctioned basically by the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Some would say if it had happened the other way around, Hillary Clinton would have said, they stole the election. Every election is stolen now in the United States. Man, it's getting filled up. Max Power blames everything on Mark Carney for you Americans or anyone else anywhere else in the world. Mark Carney is the former governor of the Bank of Canada. Then he left that job to become the governor of the Bank of England. Then he left that job to become a senior advisor to the UN, pushing the whole climate change garbage nonsense. And now he's come back to Canada for the last 4 or 5 years. He's been advising Trudeau as he destroys our country. And now that Trudeau has resigned, Mark Carney is poised to replace him March 9th, 10th, when the Liberals vote on their new leader. And they're coronating. It's not a leadership race, it is a coronation. They are coronating Mark Carney. He's going to be the next Liberal leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. Trudeau will resign. And then Mark Carney will likewise step into the role of Prime Minister of Canada because he will be the leader of the governing party, the party with the most seats in the House of Commons. And my guess is that within days, within at most 2 weeks, he will call an election. He will go to the Governor General. He will say, I want to have the legislature dissolved for the purposes of having an election, and Canadians will be going to the polls April, May, sometime around there. And then we'll be electing new government, and it's an unpopular with my like-minded Canadian conservative friends. This is an unpopular opinion, but I do think the potential is very much there for a Mark Carney-led Liberal Party to win power again. I do think the Liberals could be reelected. They were elected in 2015, re-elected 2019, re-elected 2021. I think they could win a fourth mandate, a minority mandate. And what's happening in the United States right now with Trump and these tariffs, it's pushing a lot of non-politically aligned Canadians, and that's a large chunk of the voting population, is not always liberal, always conservative, always NDP. There's probably 25% of the voting public who will move around, 25, maybe 30%, who will move between parties. And it's pushing a lot of them toward the liberals because the media has done a good job of aligning Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party with Donald Trump and the Republicans in the US. And so now Canadians are being programmed to hate Donald Trump. There were protests today out in front of the US consulate in Toronto, people waving Canadian flags, people waving the American flag upside down, disrespecting the Old Glory, the American flag. I do not, that's disgusting. But freedom of speech, they have the right to do it. I don't agree with it. I think it's disgusting, but we live in a supposedly free and democratic country. It's funny. I am okay with someone doing something I don't like, but we've seen Trudeau, and the way this liberal mindset, Mark Carney's no different. If they don't like the speech, they will seek to have it censored. I don't like to see someone waving an American flag upside down, but that is a political expression, and that should be sacrosanct and protected, even though, and especially because I disagree with it. Just going to try and catch up. Danny saying that Carney is Trudeau 2.0, but scarier because he's smarter than Trudeau. Trudeau's an idiot. Mark Carney is very intelligent. How media savvy he is, how good he's able to present a public persona, we'll find out. But he has operatives behind him. They have an army of consultants to help him out. When he went on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, he was very polished, looked very good. Even if you like or hate, I try to be as even-handed as I can. I try not to, again, I don't live in my echo chamber. I am in an echo chamber to a degree, but I step outside of my echo chamber regularly and intentionally so that I will hear what the other side is saying. Yeah, Max is saying he wishes we had free speech in Canada. Man, oh man, what I would be saying if I didn't feel constrained by YouTube's rules with respect to everything about COVID and about the COVID roll up your sleeve stuff. Yeah, Max Power. Sorry, your bank account has been frozen for having the wrong political beliefs. And a lot of people think this is fake news, and it is not. Canadians who supported the trucker convoy in Ottawa in 2022 had their bank accounts frozen. And it's unbelievable that that could happen in a free and democratic society. And that tells us that we have the illusion of a free and democratic society. And people tend to think, well, it didn't happen to me. It happened to them. They shouldn't, if they just obeyed and done what they're supposed to do, it wouldn't have happened to them. That's a scary country to live in. It's that old poem. First they went after the communists, but I wasn't a communist, so I didn't worry about it. I didn't say anything. Then they went after the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist, so I didn't say anything. Then they went after the trade unionists, but I wasn't a member of a trade union, so I didn't speak out. Then they went after the Jews, but I wasn't Jewish, so I didn't speak out. Then they came after me, and there was no one left to speak out. Whether you like someone or not, whether you agree with their point of view or not, you've got to stand up and speak out against it when you hear advocates against free speech. And Eat Me is agreeing with that sentiment that we don't have free speech in Canada, as is Danny. What is Brett saying? Gordon, boys shouldn't compete against females. Agree, but realize certain women believe they belong in infantry company. Can I get steroids in the Olympics? It's one thing, having been in the Army, and I forget exactly when, I think it was in the 90s that they started to allow women into what we call the combat arms. Combat arms in the Canadian military, and it's probably the same in the United States. Typically, it's infantry, artillery, and armored, and combat engineers. And those trades, that's what we refer to them in the Canadian military as trade, those trades were restricted to only men up until the late 80s, early 90s, and then liberalization, and they started to allow women into them. And I'm an old sexist. I don't think they should be, but I'm willing to put a little water in my wine. And I think there should be strict physical requirements, because if you can't meet the physical requirements, and they should be, they can't lower the standards so that women can pass. And that's what happened. They said, well, we'll lower the standards so that women can pass. The standards should be what they were. There was something, and I think they got rid of it in the Canadian military, but there was something called the Battle Fitness Test, BFT, and you had to march 14 kilometers within a certain time frame, like 2 hours and 20 minutes or 2 hours and 15 minutes. And you had to do that carrying about 80 pounds worth of equipment. Between your helmet, your tac vest, your rifle, and then a backpack with all kinds of stuff in it. You had to weigh, they'd weigh you before the march. Let's say you weigh 180 pounds. Well, then you put all your gear on. Now you had to weigh 260 or more. And then you had to do a 14-kilometer march, probably 10 miles, 8, 9, 10 miles, and do it in like 2 hours and 2 hours, 17 minutes. Then once that was done, you got a little time to rest, you ate some oranges or something, filled up on water. And then you had to dig out a trench within 15, 20 minutes, dig out a trench. And then they had something called the casualty drag. And you had to be able to drag a person, I don't know how far, it'd be about the length of a volleyball court from service line to service line. You'd have to drag a guy on the ground who was about your height, size, weight. And there was no time restriction, but you had to maintain constant motion. You couldn't stop. And if you stopped, then you would fail. And that, but I think they got rid of that, and they lowered the standard, and they came out with something called, and I can't remember the acronym for it, a new test that was easier to do. And lowering the standards is just wrong. I mean, if there's a woman who can meet all the physical requirements, strenuous physical requirements that are, difficult to pass, and she does it, then I'm willing to put some water in my wine. Max is bringing on the Online Harms Act, which is another assault on free speech in Canada, because who gets to decide what represents online harm? They're going to impanel an appointed body that will determine what kind of speech represents harm. And Max is saying it's one of the most Orwellian and horrifying things from the Trudeau government. And but this is the way they promote it, is they give it a nice positive name: Online Harm Acts. We're going to stop online harm. Call it the Orwellian attack on free speech act would be a more accurate way of putting it. But stopping online harm is a good thing. My feelings are hurt, and we're such a wimpish culture now, especially in the United States and in Canada, but it's worse here in Canada. And you have a president of the United States right now, Donald Trump, who's saying we're done with this stuff. He said, we are done with being woke. That is over. Woke ideology is over in this country, whereas in Canada we still embrace it by our political class, by the ruling class. The sheep'll say bah, says Danny. Max is saying that Canada is pretty screwed in the short term because of this. Stock markets took a big dive today as well. Well, the reason they're going to take a big dive is, I've said this before, and tune into whatever. Tune into Fox Business or what's his Kramer. Tune into any of the financial networks, read Business Insider, and you'll hear the same thing. The markets like stability and they like predictability. They want to know where things are going. And right now, by imposing these tariffs on Canada and the US, Canada and the United States have one of the largest trading relationships in the world. It's not the largest, but it's one. It's probably third or fourth. I think the relationship between the U.S. and China, the amount of trade going between those two countries is number one. I imagine U.S. European Union trade is probably number two. We're probably number three. And Mexico trade between United States and Mexico is probably four or five. So what you have is a major disruption in the economic landscape. You got an earthquake happening, and where are things going to settle out? It's uncertain. And so what happens when there is uncertainty? Money flows out of stocks because business prospects are uncertain. So money flows out. And so, yeah, that's why the markets took a big dive. It's because everyone was thinking, hoping, some were betting on the fact that, the US won't follow through at the last minute. There will be an 11th hour reprieve, or they'll say, we're delaying again. But it didn't happen. And so the markets reacted. Denny is of the opinion that the egg shortage, that it's a plan and that it's involved around getting, creating scarcity in the marketplace. Max is saying there's 9 people watching the stream. Let's all press the like button. I'm watching it on StreamYard right now, so I can't see what's happening on the YouTube side of things. If I open up the YouTube side of things, I don't have a big, huge pipe. That sounds kind of sexual. I don't have a big internet connection, so I can't do too much all at once. I do have a big internet connection, but it's not as big as what you would get in a major urban center. I live out here in the boonies. Thank you for that, Max. Eat Me is writing, Trump will have to put water in his wine considering if the cost of living goes up in the States. He could suffer a backlash. Right now, Trump has a lot of what is called political capital. He's very popular right now. I think there are a lot of people who voted for Joe Biden who are happy, or rather voted for Kamala Harris. I think there are a lot of Democrats who voted for Kamala Harris who are going, well, you know what? Trump's not doing too bad. He's got a lot of political capital and he can afford to spend it. He can afford to do things that might be short-term unpopular and spend some of his political capital. This is when you study political science. This is one of the areas that is taught, in our democratic system, is that individuals build up political capital. And so people are willing to put up with a certain degree of, oh, well, I don't really like that, but I'm going to give Trump the benefit of the doubt because I like what he's been doing so far. So even though I don't really like this, let's just see how things go. And we will see. Yeah, Neat Me is often says, encourages people to hit the like button. Man, this is going crazy. We're up to 12 people watching now. I invite you to fill the live stream. I love reading these comments. Danny is writing, the Ohio Division of Wildlife has documented goose attacks on humans that have caused serious physical injury, broken bones and head injuries, and emotional distress. Canadian geese scare me. I'll admit it. When I've been golfing, I'm not a hunter. I couldn't shoot a deer. I have nothing against it. It's just something I could not do personally because I'm in awe when I see a deer. I saw a deer crossing the fairway in a golf course I was playing, and I just hit a good tee shot, 250, 260, had a 9 iron wedge into the green. And as I was getting ready to hit the ball, a deer came out and walked across the fairway, and it was a buck. I don't know how many points, 16 points, 12 points, whatever. Beautiful set of antlers, and it was strolling across the fairway just slow, not a care in the world. And I was just in awe of this majestic creature. I couldn't shoot one. And amazingly, it put me in such an amazing frame of mind. I settled over my second shot into the green, and I put it 10, 15 feet from the pin on the green, which is something I rarely do. I'm not a very good golfer. And but a Canada Goose, I could shoot those all day long. When I'm playing golf, quite often you'll have a water and you'll have hundreds of Canada geese there. And people have remarked, "Oh, I hope I don't hit a geese." And I go, "I hope I do." If my ball beamed a Canada goose and killed it, I would not shed a tear. I would go, good. But anyway, uh, Eat Me is writing, "Dear God, there is a website with all hunters smut. And I, quite frankly, don't want to see it. There are some things, they're the darker side of humanity that I just don't like to confront. And I admit that freely. I'm like, I don't even like recognizing the fact that humanity, that we can get that dark. And I think it's because, I have to admit that if Hunter Biden can get that dark and that demonic and that evil, and his dad, if they can be like that, we are a broken, fallen creation. I haven't touched on my faith, my Christian faith, except in saying that I'm, you know, I tick all the boxes for cancel culture, and one of them, I'm a Christian. And Christians recognize the fact that we are broken, fallen, sinful creations. And that's a harsh reality. You don't want to look in that mirror too closely because you're afraid of what you'll see. We don't want to look in a picture like the portrait of Dorian Gray, and we want to see beautiful. Great book if you ever want to read it, Oscar Wilde. I've never come across wild turkeys. I've seen them on the road as I'm driving, but that's as far as it goes. Oh, Sheriff of YouTube has shown up. We've got lots of Montrealais, lots of Montrealers. Max, if the Liberals somehow win again, then I don't really see how Canada survives the ordeal. I do think Canada is marching towards becoming the 51st state, genuinely, regardless. You have to look at a guy like Mark Carney. He moved Brookfield, his company's offices from Canada down to New York. Mark Carney's already in on moving Canadian businesses down to the U.S. because it's a better place to do business, especially with Donald Trump in the White House. As soon as they knew Trump was going to be in the White House, Brookfield moved down to New York City. This is Canadian Prime Minister, soon to be Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. And if you think he's Canada first, forget it. Mark Carney is Mark Carney first. Mark Carney follows the money. Mark Carney, moved down to Trump's old stomping grounds, New York. Sheriff of YouTube, yeah, gonna fly the transgender flag upside down. I don't think that would have any impact because I don't think anyone knows what side is what with that flag. That flag changes every week because some other group says, every time some guy gets sexually turned on by a toaster, they have to add a new symbol and a new color and a new letter. So which way does it go? No one knows. Danny's writing, traditionally flying a U.S. flag upside down, sign of distress or danger for the country. Yeah. When Toronto Blue Jays, 1992, were playing the Atlanta Braves in the World Series, first time a Canadian team had qualified, had made it to the World Series. And in the first game at Atlanta, I think it was Fulton County Stadium, a U.S. Marine color guard came out Check this out online. They came out carrying the Canadian flag upside down. And later, that Marine color guard claimed it had been a mistake. And the Marines, military in general, attention to detail is huge. And the Marines, especially, and to think that they didn't know what they were doing, bull roar. They flew that Canadian flag upside down on purpose. It means just, we are in distress. Help. SOS. When the Canadian trucker convoy was going on, when we had the protest in Ottawa, I never liked seeing the Canadian flag being flown upside down because I do not believe it is helpful to your cause to send out a message that I am in distress. No, proud. I understood the motivation behind flying it upside down. It was a way of saying things are bad and things are upside down. I get it. Just with my background, I did not like seeing that. I thought it was disrespectful to our flag. But once again, even though I disagree with it, I would never seek to have it banned. I would tell someone, I don't like you flying that upside down. But I wouldn't say that should be against the law. I would never do anything like that. Danny's writing that today, however, people have begun using this whole war cry in response to political uncertainty or as a way to show their unhappiness with the direction the way the country is heading. Yes, it's used in a different way now. Brett is writing, Sheriff, you heard Trump. There are only two sexes, male and female. And that was one area. Well, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I haven't lived in the United States since 1975, so it's been how many years? I don't know, 50. I wouldn't mind moving back. Thinking where? I've had people ask me, if you're going to move back to the States, where would you move? Would you move back to New York, to New Jersey, to Oregon? I'm like, none of the above. West Texas. And I say West Texas because East Texas is hurricanes. So somewhere probably around San Antonio. That would be one. Florida on the Gulf Coast, but again, hurricanes scare me. Sometimes hurricanes go up the Atlantic side, sometimes they go up the Gulf side. And when they go up the Gulf side, that's when Florida, the Gulf Coast of Florida can get hit. And eastern Texas gets hit, places like Beaumont and Houston. So San Antonio would probably be my first pick. Let's see. Trying to catch up because I'm going to wrap it up pretty soon. I'm going to wrap it up by talking a little bit about the war in Ukraine. And Brett enjoyed hearing about military stands. Good. Eat Means writing, so are we going to talk about Cheesecake Ford cutting the electricity to millions of Americans? There's another thing that could both nickel and this electricity threat. The electricity threat is far more. I mean, you talk about the potential for an open declaration of war. And you see, number one, okay, let me step away from the comment section for a while. And when the COVID era happened, COVID 2020, it was the end of the last year of the Trump presidency, coincided with the COVID era. And I guess it was in April or May that Trump announced his warp speed program that was going to take this 10-year process to develop a vaccine. Normally a vaccine would take 10 plus years to develop, but we can do it faster. And there were pundits suggesting that, well, going at warp speed and shortening the process, maybe we can get it down to 2 years. Heard a lot that was a common by experts in the medical field would say, putting all our best shooters, putting pucks on the net from using a Canadian hockey reference, that we can take this process and maybe get it down to about 2 years. And we all know what happened. Forget 2 years. It was done in like 6, 7 months. April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. 7, 8 months. Bang. Less than half of the best case projections we've been told back, when COVID started. But was Trump, was that Trump's idea, or was he taking advice from others? Were they telling him what to do? And of course, I think they were telling him what to do. Trump is not a virologist, an immunologist, an epidemiologist. He doesn't have a background in the sciences, and certainly not in medical science. So he had these experts all around the room and telling him this is what you need to do. And he went with it. And I like the fact that at least now he's recognized that, individuals should have the right to bodily autonomy. My body, my choice. And if I don't want to get that shot, well, then you can't force me. And you can't take away my job if I refuse to get it. And that's why US military members who chose not to get the shot and had to suffer a discharge, and maybe even I'm not sure if it was dishonorable or not, but I imagine it was, because that could be seen as disobeying a lawful order. Well, they've been reinstated with back pay. So good on you, Donald Trump. Now I'm wondering whether do I think Donald Trump got bad advice with respect to the things that happened during the COVID era? Yes, I do think he got bad advice. Do I think he's getting bad advice now on the tariff front? Yes, I think he's getting bad advice. I think if he wants to bring in tariffs, I think he should stagger them, incrementalize them. So 2.5% every 6 months or something to that effect, and to fixate primarily on China and countries that are hostile to the United States of America, not to its closest trading partners and best friends. But the globalist forces that are within the U.S. government, Canadian government, they, I think, are the ones who are ultimately giving Trump the advice. And I think they're also the ones who are giving Doug Ford his advice to, shut off electricity to the U.S. This will bring about war. And war will go along, just as COVID went a long way to pushing the globalist agenda, bringing in a digital ID, the infrastructure that they put in place for the vaccine passport is the same type of infrastructure they'll need for a digital ID. And I think this is globalist forces pushing us in the direction that will lead to further advances on the globalization agenda 2030 path. We're heading in that direction. That's my biggest fear. We had Max saying, liberals say we need to unite behind Team Canada. They're suddenly patriots, and yet for the few years they've been calling to cancel Canada Day and destroyed monuments. And get rid of, we should be ashamed of Sir John A. Macdonald, the Prime Minister who created the nation state of Canada. You would think that Hunter Biden would have been less of a screw up. Hey, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He could have used all of his advantages for good. And instead he became a drug addict and child porn consumer. Yeah. Smut peddler. There's another way of putting it. Danny's writing about Arizona. Potential for Arizona. He's done some winters there. His dad winters in Arizona. I don't know. Arizona, I don't know. A little too hot maybe, but then they say, well, it's a dry heat. 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 plus. Yeah, but it's a dry heat. I don't know. It's not going to happen. Cryptomeria, like the stream. Thank you. And Eat Me used to live 50 miles from San Antonio. We got the dirty side of the hurricanes. Okay, whatever that means. Oh, anyway, getting late, and I do have to work tomorrow. It's now 12:46 a.m. where I am. So I was going to end talking a little bit about Ukraine and Russia, but I'll leave that for another night. I mean, it's obvious what the Democrats want, the left side of the aisle. And up here in Canada and much of Europe, Trump is the outlier. He wants peace, whereas most of the world seems to want more war. And that's a sad thing. And I'm hoping that that war ends. But why do they want to keep it going? Why do they want to keep it going? I think it furthers the WEF 2030 agenda, all that. I think it does it. It pushes us more and more in that direction. If you watch the whole thing, if you're sticking around at the 135 mark and haven't subscribed, please do, or at least think about it. And thank you for all the thumbs up. I don't know how many I have. I'm on StreamYard, but I like this platform. So the way I like to end my videos, you guys all know it. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may the Lord grant you peace. I've spoken about The Chosen before. Guess what? That's now before watching Trump's speech. We just finished watching, my wife, youngest, and the three of us watched the last 2 episodes of season 1. I've actually watched all of season 1. Got to do a stream on that sometime. I'm actually willing to recommend The Chosen, especially to individuals who have no grounding whatsoever in the Bible. If you don't know faith, anything about the Christian faith, if you've never read the Bible, if you've never been to church, and you're curious and you're wondering, check out The Chosen. It's not perfect, but nothing of this world is. So I'll leave you there. Whale Oil, you're welcome. And I'll read the last few. Danny's talking about introduced in the Dishonorable Discharge Prevention Act. So if you didn't get the vaccine, you were going to be dishonorably discharged, it looks like, by what you're writing. And how realistic it is, I'm sure now, they after a speech, after either a State of the Union or a speech in front of the joint, Congress and joint session of Congress, House and Senate, they'll then go to the political talking heads, and the Democrats will have an individual who will go and they'll give their response, and they'll outline all the lies they think Donald Trump told. And for what it's worth, Donald Trump, did he lie? Were there any facts that weren't 100%? Guess what? Newsflash. Politicians sometimes exaggerate, sometimes make things up, sometimes blow things out of proportion, but it's only Donald Trump. Democrats never do. If you believe that, I've got a farm in Ukraine to sell you. So God bless. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hit like, hit subscribe. Always appreciate it. Let me find the end stream button. End stream.